Christ has risen, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you for making the time out of your busy days. The first thing that I'd like to do in terms of housekeeping is I would just like to express special thanks to Leadership 100. Leadership 100 has helped kickstart a national initiative that we're doing on the security front to help protect the archdiocese, metropolises, and parishes. And we're pleased today to have with us representatives from CISA. So CISA, in case you're not aware, is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency. And we're proud to be working with CISA. And CISA, simply put, is America's cyber defense agency who leads national efforts to understand, manage, and reduce risk to our critical infrastructure, of which our faith communities are part of that critical infrastructure. And what we'll be doing as part of this is we'll be putting links to a couple of resources in the chat. And then our special guest will also be showing those links online. And there's a specific section that CISA has that's actually dedicated to protecting houses of worship. So that'll be something you do want to reference and bookmark and share both with the clergy and parish councils in the archdiocese. And the second item, which will be touched upon, is there's a grant program available to nonprofits and our houses of worship, our churches, to help provide some of the seed funding to protect and install that critical protection sphere to protect our houses of worship. So without further ado, I'm going to do an introduction to our two presenters briefly. I've had the pleasure and joy of working with both of them. The first up will be Rich Richards, who's our Chief of Cybersecurity for CISA Region 2, and Jose Dos Santos, who's the Protective Security Advisor for CISA Region 2. So Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Teo, for the kind introduction. He indeed has risen. All right. So again, my name is Rich Richard. I am the Chief of Cybersecurity for Region 2. If you're not familiar with CISA, we are broken out regionally, geographically. We have our headquarters element down in Arlington, down in DC, and then we also have 10 geographic regions throughout the country. Jose and I's area of responsibility is Region 2, as you see here, New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So a little bit about CISA. We're a fairly new agency in the federal space. We came into being in roughly November of 2018. Before that, we were all part of the Department of Homeland Security. Basically, Congress, in its wisdom, decided to split out a large chunk of DHS that was responsible for infrastructure protection, both the physical side and the cyber sides of the house. So they split us out and created CISA, the agency. So what that means to you, probably not a whole lot. We're still working with the same folks that we were working with before, not in any different capacity, but perhaps under a different umbrella, so to speak. I have been with CISA, well, DHS and now CISA, since June of 2016. When I started, I was the number 5 cybersecurity advisor in the country, and my area at the time was from New England down through the bottom of Virginia and over to Pennsylvania and everywhere in between. So I had a pretty large footprint. Now we're upwards in the cybersecurity advisor program. We're up over 100. So we have a bunch of folks that are out there in the country and even more in our region. We have 4 so far, and we're still hiring. I've got a person in Albany, another person in Buffalo, person down in Trenton, Virginia, and a person way down in Puerto Rico, down in San Juan, who I have mixed feelings about because now that we have someone there, I don't get to go nearly as often. So what do? It's our job to work with critical infrastructure to help them quantify, manage, and understand the risk associated to their organizations. My purview is the cyber side of the house. Jose is going to speak after me as he's on the physical security side of the house. We often work these type of events together. We're going to come to we come to organizations in critical infrastructure to include those in faith-based institutions as well as nonprofits. And we basically try to work with them to enhance their cyber and their physical security postures. The more we can do with you up front to help you quantify categorize, and mitigate risk, the better off we'll all be in the long run. And we are both local. You know, we live here in the region. I live on Long Island. I'm born and raised in New York. We have a vested interest in supporting the folks where we live and work because our kids go to the same schools, we go to the same churches, you know, we would go use the same healthcare facilities, so on and so forth. So we have a vested interest to know you personally and establish a relationship with each organization to better enable them to make use of all the different resources, knowledge, services, and experience that the folks that work for CISA here can bring to bear to help your organization. This is going to touch on some very general principles about cyber best practices. Think about these things as I talk about them, how they're in place in your own particular organization. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is just as applicable at home with your families as it will be at your parishes, at your organizations, the places you do business with, so on and so forth. I'm just going to give you some knowledge which perhaps you can use to ask the right questions to the IT people in your own organization. You know, ask some good questions, and maybe we can figure out a way to meet in the middle and work together. Small and medium-sized organizations, to be honest with you, are our bread and butter. These are the folks that we love to work with. In our region, we have an emphasis on working with small-sized organizations because let's face it, those are the folks that need the resources the most. Those are the folks that can benefit the most from working with us. They might not have the corporate knowledge, they might not have the financial wherewithal or the staffing to have dedicated IT staff and things like that. Maybe they outsource that function. Maybe they just have a person that's on a volunteer basis. So we can work with smaller organizations and really enhance their postures. Why small organizations? Why do they get hit so much, it seems? You know, it's because you're a target of opportunity. No one is too small to escape the notice of the bad guys. You know, the bad guys come in sizes large and small themselves. They all have their own sets of motivations as to why they do the things that they do. But don't think because you're a small organization, you're going to fall beneath their scrutiny. Everyone is a target nowadays. What's the big deal? I don't understand cyber. How can you bring it down to my level and talk to me Barney style about working with cyber in my organization? So a lot of it, honest to goodness, comes down to common sense. And like it says here, being safe online isn't all that different from being safe in the physical world. Many, many times you're going to be approached with a situation. Maybe you get a certain email and you say to yourself, you know, I don't know about this. You know, there's something sketchy. Something's just not sitting right with me. Or you get a text message on your phone. You're like, you know, I didn't ask for a code to get into my bank account. Why is this happening? Obey your gut. Listen to your gut. Those things shouldn't be happening. So you should listen to that. So it's like I said, it's not any different in the cyber world. Cybercrime, you know, again, these are not good people. If you don't understand that going in, please take that away from this discussion. These people are unscrupulous. Their motivations can vary. Some of them are financially driven. Some of them are driven by theology or their own mindsets, their own attitudes towards certain things would be, I guess, a good. Some of them are out there just to burn things down. You know, they're into chaos and they just want to see as much trouble as they can cause. And even sometimes you have bad people that cause loss of life. These people have no vested interest in doing anything other than making their money if that's what their motivation is, or bringing you down if that's what their motivation is. It's a danger offline and on. And again, you know, we are a proactive organization. CISA is not a law enforcement agency, nor are we a regulatory agency. So we really don't have any authorities to tell anybody to do anything on both the physical and cyber sides of the house. But we can work with you ahead of time. We can teach you how to better protect yourself in the cyber realm. how to make yourself less of a target, how to make yourself more capable of defending when you do become a target, that kind of a thing. All right, so again, malware, there's all kinds of malware. It stands for malicious software. It's just a put together kind of a thing. We all know there's all kinds of bad software that's out there. Ransomware is a scourge upon our nation. If you're not familiar with ransomware, that's where your contents of your computers become encrypted. But still, there's things like keystroke loggers. There's the old school Trojans and worms and things like that. Basically, it's software that gets installed onto your computer, gets installed onto your phone, could even be loaded into your refrigerator. I'm pointing at mine, which is right next to me, to do bad things. They, there's something called the Internet of Things. Nowadays, it's all the internet devices that are capable of being connected, like my refrigerator or your smart TV or your phone or your computer or your tablets and your car even. These all work together. And bad guys have developed ways to install bots, little pieces of software that run in the background on these devices. They have computing capability. Your refrigerator, your washer and dryer has computing capability that can run this software. And you say to yourself, well, my refrigerator obviously isn't that strong of a computer kind of a thing. What about 1,000 refrigerators or 10,000 washers and dryers or 100,000 smart TVs all working together? Becomes a different thing. So there's a lot of software that's out there, things that can capture your login ID. When you log into your computer or you log into a web page, it captures the strokes that you type in, or like I said, stuff that just wipes out your computer. Most people don't realize it, but back before the Russians invaded, before the first tank rolled across the border of Ukraine, they tried to destabilize the Ukrainian government through a series of cyber attacks. They were installing malware on computers that basically just downed the computer. It had no other purpose than wipe the computer. Some of it even to the extent where the computers become unusable, where the hard drives get destroyed, kind of a thing. So they can't even use the computer again. All that stuff is out there. So phishing. Phishing is still the most prevalent way that bad guys get into your infrastructure, get onto your networks, be it at work, be it at home. To this day, I meet with folks that they're like, why would somebody ever send that to me? I don't have any money to take. My business is small, but everybody gets these things. How many emails in a day do you get that you just simply delete because you're like, I don't know why I'm getting this. I have no idea. It is pernicious. It is widespread, and it has consequences. Phishing emails can take on very ominous tones. Sometimes they just try to trick you. Sometimes they're trying to force you to take action. They want you to think that your account has been compromised. Phishing emails can be very sophisticated, and you should have some idea what to do in your organization if you see such a thing. Maybe it's just you do a shift delete and make it go away. Maybe you forward it to an organizational email that basically can look into these things for you. But they're out there, please be aware. Ransomware is basically software that gets loaded onto your computer in the background, and it basically encrypts the contents of your computers. It's horrible when it happens. Like I said, it's a scourge because most of the time, I hate to say it, I think it's 7 out of 10 times where a small business gets hit with a ransomware attack, it proves to be unrecoverable. That business goes out of business. People lose jobs, their livelihood, and things like that, all because of ransomware, because someone opened the door for ransomware to get in. The government's stance across all of federal government is you should never, ever pay the ransom for a couple of reasons. One, you have no idea where that money is going. You could be funding actual terrorists who can use that money to fund activities to take lives. Two, you have no idea if you're actually going to get a decryption key. You could pay that money and get nothing, and your files are still locked, and you're exactly where you were, just out $10,000, $50,000, $2 million. Ransoms are getting extreme. And thirdly, just because you pay and just because you got the decryption key it doesn't mean it's going to work across all of your organization. All right, so what do you do if you think you're the victim of an attack? You know, it says phishing attack, but this could be any kind of an attack. There's a lot of different things. Obviously, your own organizations probably have a process or a procedure in place. If you think you see something sketchy, you should know what that procedure and process is and follow it through. But again, you can file a complaint to the Internet Crime Complaint Center that is ran by the FBI. It's not something that, I'll be fair, they collect a lot of information, and you could do anything from, I've been the victim of a $5 million fraud situation my business has, to, hey, I tried to buy a pair of sneakers on eBay, and the guy took my money and I got no sneakers, and everybody in between. You can all file on the Internet Crime Complaint Center. But it's a good way to look for trends, and if it's a big enough deal, the FBI will basically work on it, and those get referred to us for us to do some level of outreach depending upon the severity of the thing. But if you think you've been a victim, you think your password has been compromised or something like that, call your bank, call whoever it is that you think you have a problem with, your credit card company, or go to their website directly. Never use a link that comes through a text message or comes through an email. Never click on that link to go to to that organization. Even if you do think you have a problem, open up a brand new browser window, use the link that you maybe have saved or type it in. Make sure that you have that good antivirus, a good malware product running on your systems. Make sure it's up to date. Look for warnings. If you think you have a problem, call those people directly, contact them, and let them know. They can be on the lookout for activity that is not yours, kind of a thing. They can put warnings out to you. So you think your password might have been compromised, and you change it, you go online, you do the right thing, you change it. Somebody tries to use that old password, they can let you know that this is going on. So you can do all these things. Passwords can become complicated, especially when you're required to use long ones. When I worked for Northrop Grumman, I had access to top secret systems where I had to use a computer generated random password that was 14 characters long, multiple lowercase, uppercase numbers and special characters, and it changed every 60 days. And if I wrote it down, I could go to jail. So if I can remember those passwords to get on, you can remember your passwords, especially the ones you get to pick yourself, but don't use the same ones as you do at work on home. So mix up your passwords. Different passwords, like it says here, use the longest ones that you can remember, pass phrases. Just so you know, most people, including the bad guys, understand that you might have your regular password that you use. Throwing an exclamation point at the end of it does not make it tricky. The bad guys know that that is the most prevalent way that people try to make a strong password, is they throw an exclamation point at the end or a $sign, those two things. So be a little more creative. And you can use a password manager. It's a great way to securely store your passwords, so you can really have mixed up different passwords for different things. People post so much information online nowadays. They overshare to the extreme. Maybe you're on vacation and look at all my photos. Here I am on the French Riviera. Here I am in the Bahamas. I'm on a cruise, whatever the case may be. Basically, you're just telling everybody there's nobody home in your house. Or maybe you have a whole bunch of different information that they can aggregate together and put together a picture that they can then use to exploit you. Just have a care as to who can see what and what you're posting, the picture you're painting of yourself. Things to do, again, just as good at home. Make sure you have backups of your information. Enable multi-factor authentication. Again, that's that deal where you have your login ID, your password, you go to your bank, you type it in, and you get that 6 or 8 digit code that in a text message, and you give them the code, and then you get access. That can save your bacon. If you don't have that enabled and someone captures your password and login ID, you just gave them access. Update your systems, allow them to update automatically. Again, we can talk a lot about this. about traveling safely. When you travel, understand that airport Wi-Fis and especially hotel Wi-Fi networks around international airports or around big business centers, or if you happen to be up by embassies or things like that, government offices, they are some of the most compromised in the world. There's literally almost no security on those Wi-Fi networks. You use them at your own risk. Maybe have a VPN installed on your phone that gives you an encrypted tunnel through the internet to do things. It's a good way. Or just use your cell signal. Turn off the Wi-Fi. Don't use USB devices that you find on the floor. I know there's folks out there that would be like, score, free USB stick, and it's a big one. It's, you know, this would cost me $100 at Best Buy. And they plug it in their computer, they wipe it, and they're like, good to go, got a whole thing. Meanwhile, they didn't know that it had malware on it. It was left there intentionally just to see who would plug it in, kind of a thing. It happens. So have a care with that stuff. Don't install it. You know, don't stick it in willy-nilly. Cross-sector cybersecurity performance goals. These are nuts and bolts basics. None of the stuff I talked about before was technical. These are the technical essentials for your organization. Brand new. They've only been out a short time from CISA. These are those baseline controls that your IT people should have potentially in place on your infrastructure, the nuts and bolts stuff. We can assess compliance with this. Again, we're not trying to say you have to do all of these things, but they are a good set of basic technical best practices to have in place on your networks. You might be far in advance of these, or this might, you know, some of these might be really challenging if you're a small organization. Still, that's what we're here for. We can help you figure this stuff out. We can run, you know, do this assessment jointly with you and figure out where things stand, and then help you, you know, help you navigate how to get, you know, to a more secure place. Shields Up, all things Russia, Ukraine. It's been up for over a year now, this website. It has got a tremendous amount of information. I encourage you to take a look. Like I said, we know the Russians did a lot of sketchy stuff to Ukraine long before the tanks rolled across the border. Heck, I think it was in 2015, they brought down a chunk of the Ukrainian power infrastructure for no other reason than because they could. They used Ukraine for a long time as their own personal sandbox to play with tactics and techniques that they could use it for perhaps a more mature target down the road. But everything you ever want to know about Russia, Ukraine is in this one place. Take a look. A lot of interesting information, even just general information. It's a good read. All right, that is my contact information, and I will absolutely, I believe I've already made it available in the chat. I am going to stop sharing and turn the screen over to Jose. Whoop, where are we? There we go. All right.
Thanks, Rich. A lot of great information there. Certainly made me think about a couple of things. So in the next few minutes here, Rich did an excellent job talking about the cyber program at CISA. What I'm going to talk about is the second pillar, or the second leg. I like to say that, you know, if you look at CISA really as a chair, you need at least 3 legs for that chair to be stable. Rich covered the cyber piece, which could be considered one of the legs. I'm going to talk about the next 2, which is our physical security program, as well as our resiliency. You know, it's great to have all of these security procedures and measures in place, but when something does happen, we have to be prepared to be able to recover from that, so that we can get back to conduct our business or get back to our normal, you know, everyday life of, you know, recovering any funds. Let's say if we are subject to an attack that affects our financial well-being. So we want to look at the resiliency measures and programs that we also have available. I'm going to focus in on the faith-based safety and security resources that we have here in CISA. And CISA has done a lot of work over the last few years. That the agency has been a standalone agency. Again, Rich mentioned that we are a new agency. However, the program, services, and what we do actually goes way back to the beginning of DHS. When DHS was first stood up back in 2003 or so, we implemented the security measures to go work with critical infrastructure. At that time, we were certainly focused on what had just happened in New York in 2001 with the terrorist attacks. So we were looking at how do we protect our nation from another attack. But as the years went on, we realized, not only is the vast majority of our critical infrastructure held by the private sector, but when we look across our community, our small and medium-sized businesses, our faith-based community, that those are also important aspects of critical infrastructure to the day-to-day life of Americans and residents of the United States. So we wrapped all of that into what we consider critical infrastructure. That's why a lot of our programs are really geared towards not just those large corporations and large critical infrastructure partners and stakeholders that Rich mentioned, but all of our community. Because without our small businesses, without our faith-based organizations, we would be really hard pressed to answer the question of who are we as residents and citizens of the United States if we don't have all these other functions available to us as well. So over the years, CISA created the Hometown Security Program. If you go to our website, you can see all the material that I have here, and I have the link right there at the bottom of my slide. And this is where you'll find all those resources that are available to you individually, as well as to your parish and other organizations that you may be affiliated with. Within that website, you'll have links and other resources also available. Some of the web pages dedicated to enhancing physical security. First, the faith-based organizations, houses of worship, and I'm going to go into some of these more specifically in the next couple of slides. But we also have some guidelines and information on securing public gatherings. So as parishes, I'm sure you have a lot of individuals coming to your services. You may have special events during certain holidays, or maybe you put on, if you have a school associated with your parish, you might be putting on concerts and plays and things like that for the kids. Unfortunately, the reality that we are living in now forces us to think about how are we securing the influx of individuals that are coming to visit our organization. I think back to just a few years ago during COVID, actually, there was a parish in New York City where someone came to a religious gathering that they had. I forget now if it was Easter or maybe even around Christmas time. They were having a large service, and they had a couple of hundred people attending the service. And an individual did come with weapons and a backpack full of bad things that he was planning on using to attack the gathering. NYPD resolved that situation. The individual was actually killed before he was able to hurt anyone else. But again, our programs that we have, the material that we have available is all on the website, and it gives you a lot of great information, a lot of guidance on how to develop plans to secure your public gatherings. We also have active shooter preparedness. Again, as we watch the news every night, it seems like almost every day there's another breaking news event of an active shooter situation occurring, and faith-based organizations are not immune. We know that there have been specific targeting of faith-based organizations. The Shields Up website is a cyber component, and Rich covered all that, so I'm not going to go into that at all. And then we also have a program called the CISA Tabletop Exercise Package Program, which are essentially templates and exercises in a box. We provide all the material that you would need to conduct an exercise at your organization. So if you have developed a plan on how to respond to a specific scenario, you can go to our website, download this package, and it gives you step-by-step measures and instructions on how to conduct an exercise to see how that plan would fare in a true, real life implementation of that plan. And then, at the end of the exercise, it also has guidance for developing lessons learned so that you can take back those lessons learned that you identified through the exercise to update your plans to make it that much better, so that you can resolve any of those things that may come up. CISA faith-based resources, again, faith-based community resources. This is a specific page under that hometown security program designed to help guide you through a step-by-step process that really gives you the foundation for how to develop a program that you can use to implement at your specific organization, your specific parish, to help keep your staff, your employees, and your parishioners safe. So, if you follow those steps that are provided, it'll take you through the entire continuing security improvement cycle. So it takes you from how to write a plan, what information needs to be included in that plan, how to provide that training that's needed based on the plan to your organization, and then finally how to conduct that exercise to see how that plan would fare in a scenario. Some specific measures or information guidance that's available there is mitigating attacks on houses of worship. The security guide, again, a step-by-step guidebook that you can use for all aspects of security, physical security for your parish or organization. We also have a self-assessment tool, which is available for download, and I'll talk a little bit more about the self-assessment tool in the next couple of slides. And then it gives you some more information about the CISA Protective Security Advisor Program. As Rich mentioned, in Region 2, we cover New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. But we have PSAs, Protective Security Advisors, across the country. Every state has at least one Protective Security Advisor. Here in New York City, we actually have 4 that covers our district, our area, which is all 5 boroughs, Long Island, and the 4 counties north. But if you go to other states, California, for example, they have several PSAs in Los Angeles and the rest of the state. Texas, I know, being a larger state, has multiple PSAs covering their state. So no matter where you're located, there is a PSA and also a cybersecurity advisor that's available to meet with you and to work with you on implementing any of the security programs that you may need to secure your organization, your parish. To talk a little specifically about the mitigating attacks on houses of worship security guide, as I mentioned, it's a step-by-step process that it provides you. So it's based on an analysis that's looked at the last 10 years of targeted attacks, specifically on houses of worship. So between 2009 and 2019, this guidebook has looked at all the targeted attacks on houses of worship in that time period to develop the commonalities between those attacks so that it can walk through how to implement mitigation strategies to hopefully prevent any of that happening, and then what security measures can be put in place to help better secure a house of worship against those types of attacks, and then also what can be done. We hope it never happens, but if it were, what can be done afterwards to help recover from those incidents. So it focuses very highly on a security plan. And one thing that I would highly emphasize, like Rich mentioned on the cyber piece, the best thing to keep ourselves secure is to have a plan in place. So to identify what those potential vulnerabilities are, which can be done either through the self-assessment tool that we have available, or even having one of our PSAs come out and do a security assessment with you, for you, walking through your parish to identify those in person. But having a plan that thinks about what the vulnerabilities are, or identifies what the vulnerabilities are, and then goes through how to mitigate, how to reduce the risk or the impacts from any of those vulnerabilities so that you could be that much more secure. That's also covered in this guide. And it also acts as a starting point. So if you've never thought about security, you don't know what security is, maybe you're not security minded, you have other functions within the parish or the organization, this guide and all the materials that we provide are really for individuals like yourselves, and they provide that very basic steps that you can take, even though you may not be a security professional. So we really boil it down to the simplest factors so that it can be used and implemented. So the self-assessment tool, as I mentioned, it is available on our website. You can go through it and use the self-assessment tool to conduct the vulnerabilities assessment yourself to help identify those vulnerabilities. And then the tool doesn't only identify the vulnerabilities, but also provides options that you can consider for mitigating some of those vulnerabilities. So, for example, if a vulnerability is, a bad actor gaining access to your facility, because insufficient security procedures or protocols, some of the options might be look at installing CCTV to provide surveillance of your location, or maybe improve on the locks and access control that you may have. So it identifies a vulnerability, and then it also provides options on how to reduce the risks associated with that vulnerability. And as I mentioned, that's something that you can do on your own with your powers, with your organization, with your team, or you can also, as Teo can confirm this, we can also come out and work with you one-on-one to help you through that process. Some of the other programs that we have, again, based on all the research and all the analysis that not only CISA, but also the bigger DHS, but also the FBI, the Secret Service, and other law enforcement organizations, all the analysis that they've done on these attacks that have occurred is that there has been a process that these individuals have gone through to lead them to the point where they feel like they have to conduct a violent act. And that applies to everything from terrorist events to active shooters. And through this process, or we actually call it the pathway to violence, what's been determined is that these individuals have developed some kind of grievance, and that could be theological based. It could be because they have maybe mental health issues, or maybe they have a personal issue, someone going through a divorce, and they want to lash out at their significant other, or whatever the case is. But there's a grievance that they've developed, and because of that, it's led them to believe that the best way for them to overcome that grievance is to conduct a violent act. And what we found is that sometimes all it may take is a simple approach to an individual that could actually take them off of this pathway that they're on. So someone that maybe is, thinking about doing something bad, they're going to the location that they're planning on conducting their attack, and someone comes up to them and just talks to them in a nice way, or approaches them in some way, they may now change their entire plan because they were disrupted from this pathway that they may have been on. So we talk about the power of hello, because that offers the tools and the training and also guidance on how to increase our own situational awareness, so that we are open to identifying these potential behaviors that might indicate someone is planning on conducting an attack. And then it goes through some of the tips and techniques on approaching the situation, so that we can de-escalate whatever the situation is, to avoid having ultimately some other more violent attack take place. That's covered under the de-escalation series, and that series is based on 4 tenets: recognizing potential warning signs and indicators that someone may be on this pathway to the violence. Someone may be conducting surveillance on a location. So what are some behaviors that we can be observant to for someone that's conducting surveillance? Going back to the analysis studies that have been done on these attacks, is that locations typically aren't random. There's been planning that's taken place by the individual. They've identified locations based on what they think are going to be the easiest or more or the best target to attack, for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they have less security than a location next door. So being able to recognize those warning signs will go a long way to being able to protect ourselves and identify if there is someone that they may be looking at, surveilling our locations because they're planning an attack. How to assess the situation, how to take into consideration what's going to be the best way to keep ourselves safe while responding to that situation. And then we go through some de-escalation techniques, how to maybe, if we are approaching individuals And while we're talking a lot about active shooter and very violent attacks, but this could also be to someone that is maybe just being overly aggressive. You know, if we're talking about a retail situation, you know, a customer that's become frustrated and angry, well, these de-escalation techniques can also be used to de-escalate that situation and take the individual to a more calmer place so that we can handle it a little more appropriately. And then, of course, how do we report situations that may occur? What kind of information do we need to provide in this reporting so that it's most helpful to the responders or to the individuals that need to respond to that report to continue the resolution process? Cybersecurity, ransomware already covered. So at the end of the day, what we look to provide from the physical side and the resiliency side is really emphasizing that in order to be best prepared, we really need to have a plan in place. Teo at the beginning mentioned the links that he's provided for the grants that are available. These grants are awesome programs. They provide significant amount of funding to secure our parishes and our organizations. But if we don't have a plan, doesn't matter how much money we spend on cameras or access control systems or locks, you know, if we don't have a plan on how those measures are going to reduce the risk, then we're really just throwing money at a problem that may not be necessarily doing much good in resolving the actual issue. So we want to develop a plan, identify what our vulnerabilities are, and then capture the funding that may be needed that can be put towards reducing those vulnerabilities so that we can ultimately lessen our risk and become that much more secure. So that's the way that CISA has packaged our hometown security program, and all the resources that are available really go towards that goal. You know, they're all steps in the process of reducing risk so that we can become more secure. As I said, we have multiple PSAs here in the New York City district. These are names and email addresses for the team in New York City. But again, for those of you that may not be in our area, if you want to speak with the PSA directly, let us know, and we'll certainly put you in touch with the PSA in the local area. And again, just to emphasize, we are across the nation in every state, as well as some of the territories like Puerto Rico. But no matter where you are, there is a PSA in your area that we can link you up with. So if you would like that information, just let us know, and we can put you in touch with the appropriate individual. And Teo, that is all I have. I know we're reaching up on the.
That's great. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Rich. So once again, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Teo Nikolakis. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. And just thanks to CISA, to Rich and Jose, and for the Department of Internet Ministries for putting all this together. A couple of parish-specific items I did want to mention. So number one is more and more parishes are using different kinds of software. Please be extra vigilant with the kinds of software you're choosing to use and what that software does. It's more and more common to have what they call cloud-hosted software, or software that you access through a web browser. And just because you can activate something doesn't mean it's something secure. So be cognizant of doing some due diligence, especially if that software is going to be used to house financial information or information about your parishioners. This is all sensitive data, and we're guardians of that data. The second item that I wanted to highlight is many parishes today have corporate style email accounts. So you're either using a Gmail or a Google Workspace or something through Microsoft. And some of these free accounts do not, and I want to emphasize, do not have the type of security layers you need at the parish level. You need to pay for it. So the days of free email as a baseline for parishes is over. We recommend at the Archdiocese that parishes start using business grade accounts, because those business grade accounts provide some antivirus that scans inbound emails, and it even provides a layer of security for links that are embedded in emails. So at a bare minimum, please make an effort to do that, and you should eliminate the use of these free email services. I would also suggest a few other things. If your parish does have a wireless network, a Wi-Fi network, that you segregate or separate a guest network if you have parishioners joining versus what's on the office. Because if that's open and you give the passwords out, any infection that a parishioner has, they can bring to your devices. So what Rich had mentioned in terms of the ransomware, imagine for a second you have a parishioner who does not have great cyber hygiene, but perhaps you do at the parish. If you let them onto your network and they theoretically then have visibility to the computers and systems on your parish network, they could, just as a regular virus, they could become a contagion. They could transmit that virus or that malware to your parish network. So you don't want to do that. You want to separate those two. And then just a couple of other points that, I don't know, Jose, if you specifically have any points. So, in terms of me, I've served both as a vice president and president of parish council. I'm well aware of some of the difficulties and challenges. So one of the things that I did is many, many years ago, or 10 years ago, I established a security committee locally. So it can be made up of law enforcement professionals, maybe someone who works in police or fire, or someone who's a detective, or depending on where you are, it doesn't have to be, but you typically have those types of resources within your parish. Establish a safety committee, and if at all possible, parish priest, parish council president, just go say hello to the mayor, the alderman, whoever the selectman is. Introduce yourself, make sure they know you. Introduce yourself to the police chief and introduce yourself to the fire chief. I guarantee you, they will want to become partners with you, and just have the meeting and say one thing: what can we do for you? What can St. whatever parish do for you? And typically what they'll say is, it would be great if we could come to your facility, that God forbid, if there's an emergency, we know where the exit routes are. We know how emergency personnel can get in your facility. That communication is critically important. It takes 30 minutes. It's a 30-minute meeting between you and whoever to bridge that relationship. So if you have a parish festival, you have a gathering, you can communicate with law enforcement, fire, and police. They really appreciate that communication. And as Jose mentioned, they'll also be willing to work together with you on protection measures. And I will highlight, because we at the Archdiocese have done this, and I mentioned Leadership 100 at the beginning, I'll mention it again. We're working strategically with CISA and with Homeland and with some parishes to pilot some of these things in the communities to protect communities. So we have had protective security agents. We have had PSAs come on to various parishes. They've done assessments. And it's amazing what this does. You get a document back that's prioritized. This is a free service that our government provides. It's a free service our government provides that will give you a full benchmark of where you are. It gives you practical, prioritized, step-by-step analysis of your physical security of your footprint at your parish. And it gives you practical recommendations, from everything that's free to things that may have a cost, of how you can improve your security footprint. And again, it's the protection of our people. So these items are all available to you. That's why we wanted to have this webinar as well, to be a microphone. So please take this information back to your communities. We will be having more of these webinars. And if possible, we also want to have something similar at this summer's clergy laity. This is a critically important point of what we're trying to move ahead, because protecting our parish communities, protecting our people is a priority. So Jose, Rich, I don't know if we want to open up just for a couple of questions. I want to thank everybody for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. If I can, just two quick comments on the points that you made. The first one, I can't emphasize how important it is and how much value there is in getting to know your local first responders. We have a saying: you never want to meet someone for the first time in the middle of a disaster. By getting to know your local police, your local fire, your local political landscape, will do tremendous goodwill and will help tremendously in being that much better prepared. Just from the perspective of, quick example, if you're thinking about putting together a plan and you come up with an evacuation process, and you identify a location where everyone should go to if they have to evacuate your parish. Well, by working with the fire department and with the police department, you may come to find out that, hey, that's the area that they were planning on staging all of their equipment and personnel when they come in. So now there's potentially going to be a huge issue if they're responding to even a fire in one of your parishes. If you've designated the meeting point for everyone evacuating as the same point where the fire department is going to come and stage all their equipment, that's going to present an issue. So by having that communication beforehand, you can work through some of those issues. And then to touch on the assessments that Teo mentioned, we're working with Teo, looking at and coming out to several parishes in the New York City area. There's a lot of things in there that can be done that can be done at no cost. Like I said, having the resource of a PSA and Rich on the cyber side to come in and help, everything that we do is available at zero cost. So it doesn't take a single dollar to have us come out and work with you. But there's a lot of things that can be done without funding, like planning, like exercising, using the resources that you already have available to reduce that risk. So I would definitely recommend, at the very least, having a conversation with the local CISA office to see how we can work together.
If you're not familiar with a VPN, just think of it as this tunnel that goes from point A to point B that gets established. You log in and you type in a web browser, you type in a site and you go, and you're traversing the internet, so to speak, to go from your computer to that site. A VPN is an encrypted tunnel, a private tunnel going from, same computer to the same site. But imagine it's an opaque tube that your data is transmitting through, where people from the outside that, maybe you're at like a Starbucks or something, and, again, very compromised networks where people can see what you're doing. If you're on a VPN, they can't. It just protects, it gives a means to protect the information you're transferring from point A to point B and back again, kind of a thing.
So on the first part, yes, all the material that we've talked about today is all downloadable from the CISA website. They're all PDF documents that you can download. A lot of the templates and guidebooks are actually form fillable PDFs. So what that means is you download the PDF and it has sections that you can go in and type in your information. So a template for an emergency action plan, for example, it's all ready to go. It asks you for the information, you type in the information, and when you finish filling everything out, you can use that as your emergency action plan. That is already, you can print it out, you can email it to your parish, but that is a plan that you can use if you have nothing else already in place. As far as how to contact your local PSA, I'm going to drop a email in the chat. Again, if you go to the CISA website, we have an email address called Central, CENTRAL @CISA, CISA.DHS.gov. That goes back to our headquarters. And if you have you're looking for a specific contact, you let them know where you're located, and they will put you in touch with the local PSA. Or I'm sure Teo, everyone can work with you to work with us, with Rich and I, and we can certainly direct you to the appropriate office for making local contact with other PSAs.
Sure, that would be great. One thing I will tell you is the report you'll get back from CISA is fantastic. And it really is something that you should look at from a longitudinal perspective. It's prioritized. There's even a dashboard that CISA gives you online where if you check something off, it will actually adjust your risk score. And this is something that you can report back to the parish. And for those of you who are security conscious, and this is just the right thing to do, it gives you the opportunity to either speak to it at the parish council level or to a parish assembly and say, well, these are the recommended guidelines. This is how the archdiocese or the metropolis is working. And these are how we can protect our kids, because ultimately that's where we're going towards. I'll offer a perspective. First of all, thanks. I think that's it's a fantastic question. It's a practical question. And Rich, I don't know what your response will be to my initial thoughts. As in everything at the parish level, it has to be an issue of priority and looking at things from, well, where is your highest risk footprint going to be? So first and foremost, if you're looking at it from the parish perspective, email is your number one source of risk, because that's where everything is coming into. So at least to be able to have some added layers of protection on the email front is going to give you a leg up. That's sort of, I think, bucket number one. Bucket number two is what we're recommending. And again, even though it's a cost, typically parishes are going to have between 1 and 3 computers, maybe 4 at most. And to look at next gen AV, or what's called EDR, which is probably going to be familiar to you, endpoint detection and response software, that's really the baseline of what everybody should have, because the EDR software, once it's installed, it starts to look at behaviors that are funny or unexpected or malicious. And that's really going to be the next layer of protection on the cyber realm. And the third thing that I would say, as silly, maybe I don't know if silly is the right word, as obvious as it sounds, is cyber education. These are all behavior-based actions. So we typically think that breaches are done because of some system vulnerability. And yes, that happens, but it's well over 90% of all breaches are done because of some sort of human-induced action. And that's what Rich was alluding to. So at the Archdiocese, we've really made a concerted effort, both at the Archdiocese and the metropolises, to do mandatory cyber security training weekly that we do, because the more folks can be educated and sensitized, the less the risk. And then finally, in terms of whatever it may be in terms of practical, is implement things that are realistic to support, and as much as you can securely push into the cloud, that probably isn't a bad solution either, because it takes a lot of that overhead, especially the need for servers and maintenance, off your head. So Rich, I don't know what your thoughts are and if there's a response to that.
Yeah, where I think we could be of the best use, and not just in response to this question, but honestly across the board, is we kind of bring the perspective of a neutral third set of eyes to all the different folks that we work with. And I'm sure the way one parish does things is probably going to differ from the next, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it's not so much of a question as to what do I do next. It's kind of like taking that step back and going, what am I doing now? I quantifying what we have in place, the efforts and measures and protections we have in place, in a logical fashion, in a fashion where you can get some sort of a report or some information that you then have a baseline set of information that you can use to formulate a strategy going forward to do some of the things that Teo just mentioned. And that's kind of where we can work with you the most, is we can quantify your footprint, see if you have sufficient educational resources in place. We just ask a bunch of questions is really what it comes down to, and give you this information, and then you can then use that information to prioritize how to better increase the posture of your facilities, of your parishes, your congregations, and the like. So again, we have free resources, like I spoke briefly about the CPGs, the performance goals. That's just a thing that you can use. We have several other assessments that we can bring. Again, they're all free, they don't cost anything. Some are a little longer than others, some are a little more complex than others, but we can give you that neutral look at your security. And then you can just say to yourself, it's like, okay, now what? What do we do? Well, we can help you with that too. So we give you a good place to start, and then help you, march forward according to your own priorities, according to your own funding and things like that.
Yep. Okay, so this is CISA.gov. This is our main page. Okay. There's different ways to get to each of the sections. You can go under the resources and tools, and then just do a search for all of our resources that are available. We break it down by topic, So if you wanted the cybersecurity best practices, you can check that and it'll bring you to just that. On the physical security side, you see here active shooter preparedness, bombing prevention, school safety.
Okay.
And if you just check on these boxes, it actually will bring you
Everything
to
will
just
come up.
those resources, right?
Okay.
But then you can also do a search, let's say hometown security. And if you do a search for hometown security, it'll bring you to our physical security, the hometown security resources. So, and again, you'll have the active shooter preparedness, bombing prevention, protecting houses of worship. This is what we focused on mostly from the slides.
Right.
And again, it goes through each of those programs, and it has all the guidelines that you can download. So this one here, the self-assessment user guide. This takes you through how to conduct the self-assessment if you wanted to go that route. Protecting houses of worship resources. So again, just like we talked about, right? Step one, starting the process. And if you expand that out, it gives you some information, some tips, and then it will have the links here to those specific documents that we talked about. So mitigating attacks on houses of worship. If you click on that, and then it gives you the option to download it.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
That's one of the best and easiest questions. It costs nothing. Everything we do is completely free. No, that we are not going to do. Unfortunately, we don't advocate any particular software or things like that. It's really dependent upon your own organization to decide what you need and to procure it, that kind of a thing.
If you look in the chat to that excellent point, we have a program through the Archdiocese that we've done with TechSoup. So this is a clearinghouse of nonprofit discounts for software, and your parish can instantaneously be added to our master account so that you can be eligible literally with a few clicks. So Jamil, I don't know if you want to mention that. There was also another webinar that was done a few weeks ago on TechSoup. I don't want to steal Jose's time, but if you want to mention anything quickly about that, that might be a good opportunity to do so now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I added a link in the chat for that. My name is Jamil Samara. If you click on that link, or if in another time, go to the support.goarch.org website, support.goarch.org. There's a link for TechSoup there, or just click on the link in the chat. You can watch the webinar that we held a couple months ago about TechSoup specifically. And when you're ready to register, you can just send us an email and we'll get you all the information you need to register.